Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that I absolutely loved when I first played it, and this game should have won Game of the Year, but today we're going to be revisiting this absolute masterpiece. The first time I ended up touching this game was in 2020, and I was extremely ill, and it was the case that I really wanted to give the game a try. I'd been sat in cellophane on the side of my desk for ages, so I decided to boot it up. However, my PlayStation sounded like a jet engine, so I gave up the idea of ever playing it. Then in 2022, I ended up giving it a second chance on the PS5, and this game was a delight to play. But ever since, I've had this desire to jump back in and experience the world with Arthur Morgan, the man who is the best written character for a single entry I've ever seen. And just before we actually jump into the video, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like and subbing to the channel, that'd be absolutely amazing. For anyone who's here from the Exiled channel, absolutely thank you for joining me. However, let's jump into this absolute masterpiece of a game. The first time I played this game, I forced myself through the first 10 hours of it. And even like this, for example, I was intrigued, but not necessarily like overly like invested. When I first played through, I was expecting like it to be a masterpiece from the outset, and it actually is. It's just not in the same way that many other games would you would expect these games to be. You expect them to have massive action-packed intros, and this game doesn't. It brings you in on the slow basis to set you up for the rest of the game is. But yeah, I ended up forcing myself through the first 10 hours, and I would say most players, to truly enjoy this game, will end up doing that. And I'm kind of in the, I'm in the middle of the fence, I guess, is it? I'm fence sitting, I think the technical phrase is, which is, I fence sit on this idea that you shouldn't have to wait 10 hours to start enjoying a game. And then I'm also on the side of, this game is so good that those 10 hours that you force yourself to get through are worth it for the remaining, like, minimum 20 other hours you're about to spend in this game if you're just pushing through the story. Which was one of the bigger flaws of mine when I played through this game, which was I rushed through this game. It meant that on my first playthrough, I hardly did any side content. A lot of that is because I was so invested in the story. I think this story is genuinely something that no other game has ever come close to. And what that did, effectively, for this entire issue for me is that it meant that I didn't touch any of the side content, or hardly any of it, and I didn't get to truly enjoy a lot of it. I overlooked a lot of things like the camp missions, where you just sit and listen to the camp, where, let's say, the hunting missions, or the general side content that adds so much depth to this game and lore, that again, I just overlooked. And it's because it's genuinely just such a good element of this game that the story holds up so much. And because the story does hold up, it does mean that you kind of start wanting to just continue and continue and continue. This game maybe suffers from this idea that is the opposite of, let's say, something like Skyrim, for example, is a game where the story isn't great. And even though there's an invasion of the dragons, they kind of just say, oh yeah, go on, do what you want. So even though there's meant to be a sense of urgency, there never really is. And this game has the sense of urgency, and it really drags you in, like, it grips you into it, and it means that you feel like you need to finish the story, you need to be getting through it, and it's a very good element that the game's story is so captivating that you really want to keep playing it, but it does also mean that you miss out on so much. And for many people out there, when you play through this game once, they're like, you know what, I don't need to play through this game anymore, because once you've played through this game entirely, well, what else is there outside of some side content? I don't want to have to play through the whole game again to get there. But again, you miss out on so much that adds to Arthur's character and just the general lore of the world. But yeah, those first 10 hours were rough, to say the least, when I first played through the game. When I've replayed it and I've gone through those first 10, I enjoyed the first 10 hours of this game. There is something about it. It's similar to, for me, like, I'm a big lover of the prequels of Star Wars, and I think this is the best way you could show it, which is, within the first 3 chapters of this game, there is a level of light to the game. The game as a whole feels brighter to me anyway, and I think that might be the case, and I think there's a choice that they do with it, but the way that this game feels is similar to the prequels, where there's so much brightness, there's so much life, but then you end up in that final third, where there is a big difference. The tone of the game is heavily changed. It's darker, there's less hope, and all that sort of thing. Okay, let's change up some of Arthur Morgan's appearance. But yeah, beginning into chapter 2. I've still got some stuff that I want to go over and go through real quick before we actually end off this. But yeah, again, there's just so much that happens within the first chapter that gets massively and wildly overlooked. But again, that's 2 hours of playthrough. got through all of this, we're now into this part of the game where really I'd say chapter 2 and chapter 3 and then chapter 4 are truly where this game really shines and shows itself off. Chapter 5 is always the one that people argue over. I personally think it's actually a good addition. Some people don't like it, but then chapter 6 is where obviously the finale happens and everything blows up. I wanted to take a moment and talk about the gameplay, as this game is amazing. However, the gameplay is definitely not the strongest point. One of the biggest throw-offs for me for a long time when I was first playing through this game was how similar it felt to GTA 5, which isn't much to be surprised for obvious reasons. However, the game makes the most out of what it's got to make the experience great. It doesn't need anything overly flashy, as it gets the job done really well in almost every other department, and they're able to get away with this because of the primary focus being on its story. We do also have other amazing parts of the gameplay, for example the horse riding. I think one thing that I do miss about playing this game, especially when I first ever played it, is just how good the mechanics are with the horses in particular. This is another part of the horse riding mechanics that's really cool. Is just that obviously, like, needing to calm your horse, it adds to like the connection that Arthur ends up having with his horse, and obviously that just adds to the value of caring about the horse of the whole game. I got so absorbed by the story that I didn't care about looking after my horse, and in turn it meant that I didn't get one of like the better moments that you end up seeing at the end of the game, where Arthur will care for his horse after it gets killed right at the end. And that's something that I wish I had on that first playthrough, and it's something that I always remember seeing other people's when I was like doing my critique, and I was like, I didn't have that. So how come? And then I found out after comments mentioned it and so on, which is really interesting. We also got really great gunplay, which, yes, it's similar to GTA 5, but it's good enough that it makes you still feel like you're in a true western. What this game does a really good job of, especially what we're going to see in a minute when we get introduced to things like Deadeye and everything like that, is just how much this game really immerses you into this feeling of like being in like the western cowboy sort of feel. As I feel like, especially, I mentioned this in the critique, and I feel like at least cowboys, at least for my generation, aren't something that's too interesting, and the history of it isn't overly interesting, or at least we weren't heavily taught that much about it. Might be different over in America, but in the UK we hardly ever got spoken about at all about general American history. We got given the overview, but nothing like, oh, this is the cowboy stuff, or this is what happened during all this time in history. A lot of it just comes across as a bit boring and a bit plain, but this game definitely made me have a level of appreciation for it that I was really surprised about, and I think a lot of it comes down to how this game is able to make you feel like a cowboy, from the pistol draws through to the combat system and the overall vibe of the game. Oh, so this guy here is the one who we just let go. That's interesting. I never realized that. I didn't hear that conversation originally. Ugh, no. Damn it. I missed my Deadeye shots, but it's fine. So I'm not doing poorly. Oh. What? What do you mean? And then we have the honour system, which for me is something that I really love, as it changes the way that people perceive Arthur Morgan as a character. Some think that he's a cold-hearted killer, and others believe that he had a heart in there after all. Neat little part of the game that adds to this level of just character depth that Arthur doesn't just mercilessly kill, at least when you don't play low honour. The honour system is definitely something in itself which is really nice. It's not new to, you know, something like Red Dead. A game like Dishonored, for example, has a system that's like an honour system, which has to do with how many people you kill and whatnot, and that can then change different parts of the game, such as the rats and whatnot, and the ending that you get. And it's definitely not new, but with the way that Red Dead does it, it changes the way that a lot of people view Arthur as a character. A lot of people think as Arthur is just like some psycho, and the reason why is because a lot of people then play him as a psycho. The way that I first played the game was literally how I thought would be the right response. So for example, I killed the O'Driscoll right at the beginning, so I was thinking, surely you want to just cut all loose ties, you don't want anyone to go running back. And when I do the high honour offer right at the beginning of this game, it proves that you don't really want to, because the high honour means that he goes back and he tells them, even though Arthur thought that he wouldn't be able to do that. and then the low honor version will make Arthur, and there's videos of this which is really funny, which is the low honor makes him into like this psycho hitman-esque, like he just goes in and obliterates. He's basically the Wild West's version of the Punisher, of what he is willing to do, and it's really cool and really just interesting to see the polarizing difference between that character of Arthur Morgan and the high honor character of Arthur Morgan. The basic gameplay is definitely this game's bottleneck, however it isn't the case that it completely ruins the experience, because they nailed one part of the gameplay system perfectly, and that is its open world design. From the general side content that we have within the world, even very early on, this here is just building us into the world of Red Dead, and there is one really cool one that you deal with within this quest alone, but it adds so much to the world and just builds this idea of how, like, within this there's so many people who are kind of lies. None of them are truly who they say they are. This guy isn't really who he says he is, and all these things, and it's all blurred, and it adds so much layering. This is something that I did very little of on my first ever playthrough. I know, I committed the cardinal sin of playing this game, as the side content is amazing, and it adds so much to the world. I've seen plenty of it, however in this new playthrough that I've started with this video, I end up actually deciding to put more effort into the side content. I want to spend more time diving into the world itself of Red Dead Redemption 2. But it's not just the side content. Those characters and even NPCs play a pivotal role into building this world into something truly superb. The game designers at Rockstar wanted to give you a world and an experience that was truly amazing, and with that, even the basic conversations that go on in the background of this game truly add to the experience of what we get. It's moments like this as well, like, again, there's stuff like the campfire moments where you can just sit and indulge in different bits to kind of connect you more with that. But there's moments like that where you kind of learn more about the story through just little moments where these characters are just having random conversations with each other, and it's something that very few games will do. The other type of conversations that happen in this game that adds so much to the lore and the world itself is the campfire, and so much of what I've learned about the lore has come from that. Not within my first playthrough, because again, I was so wrapped up in the story, but seeing so much online of so many different conversations that add so much depth to the characters and really sink in this feeling of a family.
Our job is to make a better world for ourselves. Not go backward, but go forward.
In this game, there is one area that is truly underappreciated, and that is its audio design. Everything from the guns being cocked to the texture of the ground that you're walking on is incredibly well done, and shows us just how much effort they put into wanting to build a world that felt alive. Especially you can hear it, like when I just jumped there, is just how much this game really focuses on its like audio, and it's genuinely something that very few games are willing to put as much effort into. Like the sound of the snow when you're jumping onto it, like when you're walking through it, it's your basic like kind of pushing through snow. When you jump onto it, yeah, the sound of the snow is so like eerily similar to what it would sound like in real life. It's really good. These guys always remind me of when you go down south, when you go up north in GTA 5. Even little subtle things like that right there is that because of how open this space is, you end up hearing the echo of the shotgun shot, and that's just, again, it's such small details that you don't think about. Hosea is such a great character within this game, and it's like one of the big moments that you can tell that leaves such a shift on the camp itself, the dynamic of the gang as a whole, and all this that happens. But yeah. You also then have moments like these where it just indulges you into the world with the music and all that sort of thing. And the music choice always felt odd to me for a while, and then you definitely end up liking it a lot more as you play on. If you know anything about storytelling on the big, small, or video game screen, then you'll know how important sound effects and music are to building emotion, but also building people's involvement and gripping people in those moments. They seem like really small details, but when they're stacked up on top of each other, they really bring it all together in a way that honestly, if they were completely stripped out of the game, would make it so much worse. However, it isn't just audio that helps towards this feeling of immersing you within the world. One thing that I think is really underappreciated is the horse riding mechanics, and more in particular, the lack of fast travel. It tries its best not to allow you to do fast traveling, and it's one really big thing that I actually really like. It's also auto horses that I really don't like in this, like not in this game, but in general, like a lot of games like it will really try and push away from this idea, and they'll push you down this line of like, oh, just use auto horses, but it takes you out of the world. And one of the reasons why I think like I connected with Red Dead as much as I did is because I ended up like, it's so annoying. Do I have to go buy a horse? Like, I don't really want to go buy a horse. We'll run back. But yeah, it's the case that you end up having to connect to the world because you're always having to deal with it. You can't just put your horse in auto sprint. You technically can if you put it in cinematic, but I don't like putting my camera in cinematic. And I feel like a lot of people probably are in the same boat where it's just like, the cinematic camera is cool, but it's only cool to an extent, and its novelty wears off pretty quickly. So yeah, when you have the lack of it, it just adds to the ability to suck you in even more. Something that really helps build up this world, and they did perfectly within this game and didn't overdo it, was their random encounters. Whether it was someone trying to rob me or someone injured that needed some help, both add to the experience of the world and adds fun little things to do on the way to your next location. It makes you feel truly in a part of the Wild West, a dangerous time to be alive for everyone.
Horse died and I'm stuck here. You gotta help me, mister. How about we skip the small talk, eh?
Nice try.
However, one thing that I did really love in my first playthrough, and I also love every single time I touch this game, is the hunting. Something about it is quite therapeutic, and knowing that I could get completely destroyed if I mess up makes it so that you can't disconnect from the moment. You're in the hunt, and it really makes you sink in and immerse yourself into the wonderful world. This is the mission as well where we're going to get introduced into hunting, and again, it's one of those missions that just connects you with Hosea a bit more within this beginning part. And I really, really like this mission in particular. There's something about it that's just very unique that you rarely get to experience again in the game. Obviously, because you literally don't get to experience it. But, oh dear. Damn. I always forget about this. What? Jeez, I completely forgot about how much of a massive push that is. Jeez. Completely forgot. I already killed this guy, but... However, another area that really makes you sink into this idea of being in the Wild West is bounty hunters and those missions that are around them. It's something that I absolutely love within the likes of Star Wars, for example. That is something that really grips you in and teaches you so much about the lore of Star Wars through the bounty hunters, especially in the Clone Wars TV show, for example, and this game is no different. You get loads of interesting features and lore that you gain through those bounty hunter missions, and even in this opening bit that I did, there is just little bits there that are really interesting. What the hell is happening here? Oh yes. Oof. Look on my works. Intriguing. An optional mission is now available. Complete them to gain honor. For us to truly be revisiting and actually discussing Red Dead Redemption 2, we need to talk about its story, which is definitely its strongest suit, even though it does really well in everything else. Something that I mentioned quite extensively within my 3-hour-long video talking about how it is the best story in gaming over on the Exiled channel if you're interested in checking that out. I had some disagree with me on that overall premise that it's the best story in gaming, but in terms of a pure emotional impact, I don't think anything compares. Something that I mentioned earlier is that this story works in a way that is quite special. Some try to say that it's not unique, which might be true from a general definition of the word unique, but within the world of games, not many games leave you questioning for most of your playthrough who the bad guy is. And it's also very rare for games, movies, or shows to truly show a decay of both the antagonist and protagonist, something that's done really well in this game and can't be overlooked. But yeah, one thing with this game is that it has severely unconventional storytelling, or at least I believe it does. And what I mean by this is that, kind of what I mentioned earlier, is how you end up with this issue of the game throwing you in the deep end, basically, of just exist within the story that's being told, and hopefully you end up learning who the characters are. For me, this is really hard. I'm not good at remembering names. And it meant that a lot of the characters in it originally, for a very long time when people were just talking, I was just like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, I have no clue who you're on about. And then again, by the time you get to the end of the game, you know everyone pretty well. And even if you're like me and you ended up rushing through the game originally, you still end up knowing everyone. And I think that's just a good sign to how well this game's story is paced, and also just throwing you in can have a massive payoff, because it means that we don't have to spend hours leading up to this game, playing everything that leads up to learn who all these characters are. One big part of what I was mentioning about the unconventional storytelling, though, that is actually the biggest element of this game, is that you know roughly who the, protagonists are. You get this idea, but you never truly understand who the antagonists of this game are for a while. And at least for me anyway, like I've heard like some people say, oh, it's blatantly obvious. It isn't. When you're playing through the game, they do it in a way that's meant to be this build-up over time. That for a while, you don't really know who is the bad guy. You could get ideas of people being a little bit bad, but you never truly get this feeling of there is the blatant bad guy who you need to stop. Because a lot of games will kind of do that. And I think a lot of the best games, and even best movies ever made, don't do that. They throw you in at least having empathy for the villain, even if you don't, even if you know that what they're doing is bad.
Well, I wasn't on that boat, so hard to say, but I trust your judgment, Dutch. Always have.
Thank you, son.
And because you end up seeing the slow decline, and it's even like with these three here, you got Arthur, Hosea, and Dutch. These three are the pinnacle of the gang, especially at the beginning. Hosea is the good of this gang. Dutch is the, he isn't the bad, but he isn't the good either. He's the greed a lot more. Hosea wants what's best for the gang. Dutch wants what's best for the gang monetarily, and what can get him the most luxury. Something that you learn a lot about is that during the thing, a lot of the gang's money is going towards making his place better. And then Arthur is, simply put, basically both of their sons, especially when you learn about a lot of the lore around this game. It is the case that he just slowly becomes that anyway. Another looting experience right here. Oh yeah, I believe we want to. Let's have a little read through this letter. Let's read it. So, dear Mr. Cornwall, we are yet to receive your $2,000 payment for the initial phase of exploration at Wapiti Indian Reservation, Ambarnio, as agreed in the contract between Cornwall Kerosene and Tar and the Leland Oil Development Company, dated November 9th, 1983. On the receipt of funds, yeah. So all of this is all connected to what you see later on, which is obviously the whole thing around the natives and having to deal with the oil factories wanting to take over and all that sort of thing. Dear Leviticus, thank you for the telegram and your continued interest in the Jameson Mining Company. Again, this is another part that is a thing towards the intro that you don't realise later on that builds into it, which is the factory is where you actually end up killing Cornwall later on, which is really cool. Within this game, we saw Arthur Morgan go from a stone-cold killer whose main focus was ensuring that the gang, which is his family, survive, to a man who truly seems like he wants to make whole the issues that he had caused. We see this later on with specific side missions that Arthur will take on that link either to the main story or other side quests that he had partaked in earlier on, where he's truly trying to show his new colours that he isn't as much of a bad guy. And also, we see this within just the main story alone. It's not just the side content, the way that Arthur changes from truly disliking John at the beginning, all the way through to him loving John by the end of the game and sending him off on his way. The level of detail towards the character growth and how gradual it feels that you don't even remember. Like, when you think about getting to the end of the game, you don't even recall how much Arthur doesn't like John. And I find it really interesting, just the slow pacedness, that I feel like it allows everything to build up in a way that feels natural instead of just a random big moment that switches everything. That's what a lot of stories try to do, and in my opinion it's a lazy form of storytelling. One thing that I truly do love about this game, and the way that they decided to go about setting up a prequel, was that we didn't need to play as John Marston within this to understand the world of Red Dead Redemption prior to the first game. Some didn't like this change, as many were expecting John to be a massive deal within this game. However, he isn't the main character, and really he's not even spoken to too much until the likes of Chapter 4 and onwards, and even then, it's fairly small moments until the last chapter. For myself, when I first played through this game, I never actually, I hadn't played through the first game, but I had, played a little bit of it, but I hadn't ever fully finished it, nor did I ever get that far into it. I think I got a little bit into it. But in regards to, my playthrough, I knew that he was an important character, so I was always glued to the screen whenever he did appear. And it's why, even when you first meet him at this beginning bit of the first chapter, I always just sat there listening all the time. One thing to mention as well about this game is that they do a really good job of swapping all of the characters over in terms of who is priority characters, because a lot of games will just kind of set up building up these characters blatantly, obviously. But within this game, for example, John and Zadie and all that sort of thing, these characters, they don't have the conventional essence of we're pushing it down your throat that these are important characters. You just grow with them and they slowly grow in importance, and it adds to this kind of feeling of they're clearly not important in that first half. Especially at the first 3 chapters of this game, neither of the 2 biggest characters in the late game are anywhere near as important as they are. Within the first 3 chapters of this game, he's none other than just a normal side character, but with the key difference being that we know as the players that he is important. It was a narrative choice that Rockstar took on that definitely could have ended badly if it wasn't pulled off in the correct manner. However, they did. They didn't split a fan base like The Last of Us 2 or like Sons of Liberty when that game released. Now, I don't know about you, but this game is a masterpiece. Not just from the big obvious elements that I mentioned in today's video, but in so many other tiny details that Rockstar didn't even need to add, but they chose to do so because they wanted to put extra effort to get high rewards, which they definitely did. And considering to many of us out there, we consider this one of the best games ever, I think they did the right thing. Another thing that I do like about this game, and I think we're about to go into a little bit of it, I'm not 100% sure, but we got it just a moment ago, which is Arthur's diary and him writing in it. And it's something that even later in the game, oh look, the horse is taking a shit. That is the level of depth that Rockstar gave to this game. There's a lot more things around your horse that Rockstar gave added depth to, but yeah. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. It's the first of its kind in a very long time, and if anything, the first of its kind where I've decided to do a mini video essay plus live playthrough sort of thing. So yeah, let me know what you think of this. I intend to kind of do more of this on this channel, so I can dive into other games that I haven't necessarily checked out or want to revisit in the future, so let me know what you think. I'm also going to talk about other things, internet related primarily, but mainly I want to focus on playing some games that I either want to revisit or truly want to check out that I never did. So yeah, make sure to leave a like and do subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy this sort of content right here. Make sure to come join the Exiled Ones Discord, which I'll have linked down below. And if you want to support this channel any further and you want to get early access to these videos, plus the other channel, the Exiled channel, all of those videos and the video essays and behind the scenes and all that sort of thing and input on those videos, then make sure to check out the Patreon. That will all be linked down below. And with that all being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys in the next one.